Sabah Khair. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It is Tuesday, and it is time for us to talk about food, faith, and fitness. And today's topic, we are talking about gestational diabetes. So, this has come across my radar to talk about for a couple of reasons. Number one, if anybody have been following me for any length of time, more than say 30 days, and you've probably heard the story of my mom having gestational diabetes with my little sister and then it developing into type 2 diabetes. So I am really, really passionate about helping women to avoid and reverse insulin resistance and diabetes from that personal level, but simply from a level of health and wellness and where we are in state of metabolic diseases. Diabetes is a worldwide epidemic. But one of the reasons why I wanted to come and chat about this topic in particular, because of a very disturbing study that I read out of the UK that says that women who have gestational diabetes, those children where the mom has diabetes are 6 times more likely to develop diabetes themselves. That is a disturbing study. And it also needs to be unpacked a little bit about um, what does that indicate in terms of how we need to prepare our bodies for pregnancy, even if it's our second or third or fourth pregnancy, right? And how we need to be even more conscious of how our children eat if they are born at a greater risk. So, that is what we are discussing today. If you are just tuning in because you're like, oh, I am interested in this topic, but I don't know who this lady is. My name is Mubaraka Ibrahim, and I am your health and happiness coach. If you believe that physical, mental, and spiritual well being is intertwined, and the weakness of one weakens them all, and the strengthening of one strengthens them all, then welcome. You have found your tribe, because that is what we focus on here on the Fit Muslim platform. So let's unpack this a little bit. All right. So, Amar on Facebook says she should fast and change her diet. Oh, how easy that is to say. And not necessarily to do, because most people don't know how to do that. And it is not as easy as it sounds, but I agree with you in concept. All right. So I would love to know where you guys are logging in from. One of the reasons why I love social media so much is because it literally shrinks the world, right? So I am in the United States of America, but I would love to know where you are in the world. And as we get ready to talk about this really important topic, I encourage you to tag a friend, share this, save it to your profile, because this is super important. All right, UK, the Kubo and Instagram is UK. Alusa is in Kenya. Myra is in the UK. Oh, Kanar is in Iraq. Oh, look at that. Alhamdulillah. Omar Shaz is in Atlanta, Georgia, here in the US. I love the fact that the internet brings us into one village. So, thank you for taking a few minutes to join me today to talk about this really important topic. It's important to me. I think it's important to all women, particularly women who want to have kids, women who are having kids, women who are suffering from things that they are afraid of how pregnancy is going to change. Oh, Ladan Zuru is logging in from Nigeria. Awesome. Kenya. Oh, it must be a good time in Africa. All my African people is logging in. Hey. So this is a good time then. This is a good time. It's 11 a.m. where I am. It is 11 o'clock in the morning. So whatever time it is in Nigeria and Kenya, this must be a good time for me to do a live, right? So today, let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about gestational diabetes. So what is gestational diabetes? I'm going to start there, and we're going to we're going to go back and forth, right? We're going to talk about gestational diabetes. We're going to talk about the precursors of it, and then we're going to talk about the results of it and what are some of the things that we need to be aware of for our health as well as for the health of our children. So gestational diabetes is when you, I'm going back up. This is live, so it's not scripted. So I'm going to back up. When we talk about diabetes, we are talking about the higher spectrum of insulin resistance. So you hear me talk about this all the time. Insulin resistance, right? I'm using my mic today to improve my sound quality on Facebook. So I'm just going to move it a little bit closer to me. All right. So you hear me talk often about insulin resistance, right? And a lot of people just automatically assume that means I've been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance is a spectrum, right? So if you think of how something starts and then it just continues to escalate until it gets to type 2 diabetes. So once you have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, that is sort of the disease state. It starts off with signs and symptoms of our body telling us, our insulin is a hormone. So when we talk about balancing hormones, insulin is generally the first thing that we want to go to because it is a dominant hormone. That means that when insulin is balanced or imbalanced, it creates a domino effect of about a dozen different hormones. So insulin, for example, high insulin levels have been associated with high testosterone levels in women, particularly women with PCOS, right? So that is one of the ways in which insulin resistance can show itself, right? When we talk about an imbalance of hormones, it triggers other hormones. A new state of what we call leptin resistance, right? That also is triggered by insulin. Leptin and ghrelin are your hunger hormones. That's what tells your brain and your stomach that you're hungry or you're full. That is triggered by your insulin level. If your insulin level is consistently high, then you often find that you're really hungry, right? So all of these things are triggered by insulin. Insulin resistance starts off with those signs and symptoms, and then as it escalates, your doctor may then tell you, hey, your fasting glucose came back kind of high. Now you have prediabetes. And then that might, in some women, turn into PCOS, depending on the other symptoms that they have. 70% of women with PCOS have insulin resistance. And then if you have PCOS in particular, you are much more likely to actually develop type 2 diabetes, right? But you don't have to have PCOS, obviously, to develop type 2 diabetes. Those are just things that are on the spectrum that goes from insulin resistance, just as a broad category of symptoms, to actually developing type 2 diabetes. So gestational diabetes is a particular type of diabetes that is generally temporary. So gestational means that it is through the gestation period of a pregnancy. When a woman gets pregnant, right, at about week 24, so we know a pregnancy is 40 weeks, at about week 24, a doctor will run, a medical doctor will run what is called a fasting glucose test, right? And that fasting glucose test will tell them whether or not your insulin level is functioning normally or abnormally. If it is not functioning normally, it will come back to be higher than what it needs. I'm going to give a little pause break, right? Pause break that we're going to take is that fasting blood glucose test is not just for women who are pregnant. That is how everyone who has a doctor's diagnosis of prediabetes in particular and type 2 diabetes is diagnosed. I'm also going to just take a little side break To give a disclaimer, I am not a medical doctor. I am not giving direct medical advice. This information is for educational purposes only. Now, with that said, let's go back. So let's skirt our way back to exactly what does a fasting blood glucose test tell people, right? So a fasting blood glucose test tell both pregnant and non-pregnant women, both men and women, whether or not their insulin level is functioning normally. If you do a fasting blood glucose test, so generally the way that this test is done, it is obviously a blood test, right? It is something that is only done in a doctor's office. You cannot do a fasting blood glucose test at home. There is no other way for you to determine. Oh, nope, that's not true. Let me scratch that. It is done in a doctor's office as an official fasting blood glucose test. If you have a blood glucose monitor, you can do this at home. All right, so let me scratch that. You can do this. So when you do a fasting blood glucose test, they will ask you to fast overnight, right, for 8 to 12 hours. And then they will take your blood your little bit of blood, right? It's normally done by pricking your finger and squeezing your finger on a little strip, and then they will look at the what is considered your blood glucose, right? So terms and definitions you should be aware of, right? Because I want you to be able to follow me of exactly what this means, because I think education about how your body works on a physiological level is so important, and you knowing how to eat and move for both prevention and healing your body, right? So let's define some terms. So blood glucose, it is a blood glucose happens when you ingest any type of carbohydrate, whether it's natural, whether it's processed, whether it's candy, or whether it's honey, right? It turns into glucose into your blood. Blood glucose is not a hormone. It's not a hormone. When your body detects that you have eaten pasta, bread, rice, fruit, honey, syrup, agave nectar, broccoli, greens, right? The body detects it. It takes the carbohydrate, turns it into blood glucose. Your body says, oh, we have blood glucose coming in. Let me release the hormone insulin. All right. So this is where the hormone comes in. Remember, blood glucose is not a hormone. Insulin is the hormone. Everybody has insulin. If you are a human being, you have insulin in your body. So again, we want to really educate ourselves. Insulin is not something that only people who are diagnosed with diabetes have. Insulin is not something that you have to have if you are prevalent to diabetes. Blood glucose is not something that you have to be sick to have. Every human being has blood glucose and has insulin, right? It is a hormone. It is an essential hormone that determines your metabolic health. So not only is it a hormone, it is a very essential hormone that is both the correlated and causation of many illnesses. Right? So now we have those terms defined. You ingest food that contains carbohydrate, whether it's a little bit or a lot, it's all carbohydrates. The carbohydrates turns into blood glucose. Blood glucose then triggers insulin, right? So when they are testing your blood glucose, so what does a fasting blood glucose test do, right? The goal of insulin is to keep blood glucose low, right? Once the blood glucose starts rising because of the amount of carbohydrates coming into the system, the goal of insulin is to sort of police that blood glucose. It rises really high, and now your blood glucose is supposed to push it down, keep it low, right? When you have insulin resistance, your insulin isn't doing its job. right? The insulin isn't able to push the blood glucose down as quickly as it needs to go down. All right. So, your fasting blood glucose test is going to tell you or your doctor whether or not insulin is able to do its job in keeping your blood glucose low. If you have a fasting blood glucose of less than 100, that is considered normal, right? So if they're going to give you a range. So if you're like, oh, I took this test and my doctor didn't tell me what it meant, this is what it means. If you look at your tests and it tells you 100 milligrams per deciliter, so it's 100 mg/dl, right? Then that is normal, right? That means that your test is coming back as a normal blood glucose for that day. So this is the limitations of a fasting blood glucose level. It does not give a indication of what is your average blood glucose, right? That is what an A1C test does. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. If you come back with a blood glucose test of 100 to 125, your doctor will tell you that you have pre-diabetes, right? That means, hey, your insulin hormone is beginning to malfunction. It is not keeping your blood glucose as low as it needs to be to maintain your health. So your doctor will tell you, start making lifestyle changes, right? Lose some weight, reduce your carbs, right? Start to exercise, right? The doctor is going to give you some general advice because doctors are not health coaches or nutritionists or dietitians. They're just going to give you some general advice, right? Now, if your blood glucose comes back as 126 or higher for fasting blood glucose, this is not a non-fasting blood glucose. So if you have a glucose monitor, don't run and go and grab it and test your blood glucose when you just ate breakfast a half an hour ago. That's not a fasting blood glucose test, right? Everybody's blood glucose rises after they eat a meal. In a fasting blood glucose test, if it comes back at 126, that is considered diabetes, but your doctor is not going to diagnose you the first time. They're going to say, this is of some concern. Let's watch this and let's take a second blood glucose test next month. And so if the second time you go take a fasting blood glucose test and it comes back higher than 126, the doctor will then say, you now have type 2 diabetes. This is a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. Your doctor may, at this point, order a secondary test, which is called an A1C, right? So an A1C gives a definitive diagnosis. It is a little bit more definitive than a fasting blood sugar test because with an A1C, it actually tells the average, right? So this is about what you're doing on a daily basis, right? Because sometimes people go to the doctor and they be like, I want to do good on my test. So the week before I go to the doctor, I'm going to start eating right and exercising. All right. Y'all know who you are. Y'all know y'all did that before. So those people will get a great fasting blood glucose test because it's not telling the doctor the way you was eating last week or last month. An A1C test will then tell. So here's the limitation that actually I recently found out. Well, here in the United States, what I recently found out, an insurance limitation, is I was curious and wanted to know what my A1C is, but apparently if you do not test high on a fasting blood glucose test, the insurance will not pay for you to have an A1C test. So I have no idea what my A1C is because I have never tested high enough on a fasting blood glucose test in order for the insurance to pay for an A1C test. But if your doctor actually sends you for an A1C test, here are the numbers that they're looking for, right? So if your A1C comes out to be 5.7 or below, that is considered normal. That means on average, the last few months, you've been doing pretty well in keeping your blood glucose in a healthy range. If you have an A1C of 5.7 to 6.4, that is a diagnosis of prediabetes. So that is going to give the doctor that same indication of that fasting glucose that is 100 to 125. If you have a A1C of above 6.4, this is officially type 2 diabetes, right? This is the definitive test of type 2 diabetes. I've had women to come to me with A1Cs of 14, right? Right. Remember, 6.4 is the cutoff, right? That's pre-diabetes. Our goal in order to reverse diabetes. So when we talk about reversing insulin resistance, that means any stage, whether you're a 5.7 or you're 7.5, right? Reversing it to take that diagnosis away, you need to get your A1C down below 5.7, right? It is always a wonderful day. And I'm like so giddy all day when I have a client to say, hey, guess what? Went to the doctor and my A1C is now a 5.4, right? Love those diagnoses. Love those feedbacks from clients that the A1C is now down. So when we talk about gestational diabetes, because that's the topic of today, all of these tests are still the same. The what is diagnosed as gestational diabetes does not change during pregnancy. The reason why it's called gestational diabetes is because it develops during pregnancy, and for most women it ends when pregnancy ends, right? So you go to your 6-week appointment, they now give you another fasting blood glucose test. And with that fasting blood glucose test, your levels are a normal range again, right? So that is what is categorized as gestational diabetes. Here is the issue, though. Women who develop gestational diabetes during pregnancy are twice as likely to actually develop type 2 diabetes, right? So it puts you at risk of actually developing full-blown diabetes. Now, back to the study that we talked about when we first started, that in the UK, they found that women who had gestational diabetes, the children born to those mothers were 6 times as likely to develop diabetes during their lifestyle. So, if we want to prevent gestational diabetes, that's what we want to do in the first place. We want to prevent gestational diabetes, because not only does it put us at risk, but it also puts our children at risk, right? So it's really, really important that we talk about sort of how do we prevent ourselves from just developing gestational diabetes if you are getting ready to get pregnant, right? If you are preparing for pregnancy, preparing for marriage, you know kids will come of that. Getting healthy is not just about I want to fit inside of a wedding dress, or I want to look sexy for my husband, or I just want to look good when we go on our honeymoon, right? It becomes so much more than that. One of the things, particularly about insulin resistance, no matter what level of insulin resistance you actually have, the thing about it is that consistency is the key, right? We talk about consistency with everything, right? In order for you to lose weight, maintain that weight loss, you have to be consistent. In order for you to adopt a healthy lifestyle is a lifestyle. It is continuous habits that are practiced on a daily basis, making up your lifestyle, right? But insulin resistance in particular is something that swings with the pendulum of what you are eating every single meal, right? So this is about consistent habits of eating and movement. So let's go through, not going to be on here too much longer, but I just want to give a few tips of preparing for pregnancy, the way we need to be eating during pregnancy, what we need to be doing in terms of our children and getting them healthy lifestyle and healthy eating habits so that we can prevent this generational health issue, right? And we're not discounting just genetics in general, right? So if you have a family history of diabetes, then it puts you at a greater risk. It is not a guarantee that you are going to get diabetes. We say that your genes, your genetics is the gun, but your lifestyle is the trigger. That means if you never pull the trigger, right, the gun never goes off, right? So if you have healthy lifestyle habits, you can avoid diabetes. All right. So preparing our body for pregnancy, preparing our body and adopting healthy eating habits so that we can avoid insulin resistance. When is the time we should be concerned? So, here are 8 ways in which the beginnings of insulin resistance start, right? So, people who have a feeling of always being hungry, right? Always being hungry, not a, I think I'll have a snack simply because it's there, but I must have a snack or I have no energy, right? That's a strong dependence on carbohydrates. When you have cravings for bread, for rice, for sweet things, even if that sweet thing is fruit, like, oh my gosh, I have to have an orange and banana and honey smoothie every single day. I just can't function without my smoothie every morning. That is a dependence upon sugar, right? I'm not talking, and if you experience this, you know exactly what I mean. I am not talking about I want something sweet. I'm talking about I need something sweet. I have this craving, like, even if I drink water, I eat a full meal, I just like crave carbohydrates, right? That is indication of your insulin, your leptin, and your ghrelin hormones beginning to malfunction, right? You are actually not satisfied just eating protein or just eating a vegetable. There is actually a craving for carbohydrates, right? So that's one. When you can't go a long time between meals, and we talked about this, snacking all day long, right? Grazing all day long is actually really unhealthy for your blood glucose and insulin, right? So all you people are like, oh, I'm a grazer because now I think that that's going to help me lose weight. Maybe, but you want to be skinny with insulin resistance? I'm just saying. So you don't want to keep snacking all day long. It constantly sends your insulin level up, 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 up. When you feel like, if I don't have a snack, something to eat every couple of hours, then I'm just so lethargic, right? I'm so tired. I got to have some crackers and something. I have to have a piece of fruit, right? That is your insulin level constantly spiking and dropping, spiking and dropping. That leads to insulin resistance. Carrying extra belly fat, right? We know that there's a direct correlation between belly fat and insulin resistance, a direct correlation. People who carry more fat on their bellies have a much higher percentage of being insulin resistant and actually developing diabetes, right? So belly fat isn't just about aesthetics. It's not just about I want to fit into a dress or a pair of pants. Your belly fat is a literal indication of health, right? When people have a difficult time losing weight, right? I see this often, right? This is what my coaching actually directly address. You're cutting calories, you are exercising, so you're going with the traditional, oh, just eat less and exercise more, but your weight barely budges. That is a sign of insulin resistance. When you have insulin resistance, when your insulin level is constantly high, chronically high, high insulin levels puts your body into fat storage mode. It is harder for your body to actually burn fat, to actually lose the weight because insulin is telling your body, hold on to fat, hold on to fat, hold on to fat, right? That is a sign of insulin resistance. When you have an emotional response to eating carbohydrates, right? That means that you experience sadness, anger, moodiness, and like it's only cured if you have something sweet. Now, eating sugar and eating sweet things do give us a boost of dopamine, right? It is a literal chemical reaction in our brain. But the addiction happens when it literally changes your mood, right? Where you go from being angry, and the only way, or being moody, and the only way to get you out of that is actually to give you something sweet, right? That is an indication. If you have not been diagnosed with diabetes, but your doctor have told you, I categorize what's going on with your body as PCOS, you are at a much greater risk of having insulin resistance. Women with PCOS, 70% of women with PCOS have some form of insulin resistance. This is on top of the fact that, according to the CDC, so that is the Center for Disease Control here in the United States, 1 in 3 American adults have pre-diabetes, right? I actually was misquoting this, and I went to look up the exact wording on the CDC website. What I was misquoting was, it was my own words, means the same thing, but I said 1 in 3 American adults have some form of insulin resistance. The CDC's wording is actually 1 in 3 American adults have pre-diabetes, and 70%, 7 out of 10 of them, don't know that they have it, right? So this is why I bring awareness to this particular issue. Now, what are some of so we talked about sort of the self determining, the objective ways in which we, subjective ways in which we can say, I'm seeing 2, 3, 4 of these things that's happening to me on a daily basis. But what are some of sort of the physical things that we can look for to say, I may need to go see my doctor. I may need to be aware that I'm at risk for diabetes or insulin resistance. So there are some physical signs which have been shown. For one example is pigmentation on the cheeks, back of the necks, in the arms, behind the legs, in the inner side of the legs. It turns dark and almost velvety to the touch, right? So this is an indication of insulin resistance, right? When we were little, this is just what happened. No pun or disrespect, but the overweight kid in the class was always teased by having a dirty neck, right? Because they were overweight and their neck was always dark. No matter how dark they were, the neck was darker, right? But that is actually an indication of insulin resistance. So as kids, that was the way people bullied the big kid in the class, right? But as an adult now, and now if you have a child with this, that this is actually a sign of insulin resistance. Another sign of insulin resistance is developing skin tags. So again, doesn't mean if you have one skin tag someplace on your body that, oh my gosh, I have diabetes. But if you notice, last year I had no skin tags on my neck or on my cheek. And I'm not talking about freckles, I'm talking about skin tags. They raise up off of the skin. And this year I have a clump of 5 skin tags that just developed in the last 12 months, right? So researchers show that that is actually a sign of diabetes. You need to go to your doctor. It was actually a Sudanese research team that discovered this and correlated the two together, that developing multiple skin tags in a relatively short period of time is an indication of diabetes. Acne can be an indication of diabetes and insulin resistance, as well as premature wrinkles, right? Just literally your skin just, developing wrinkles. all of the, um, as a side effect with some of these other things. If you have one of these symptoms, obviously it could be anything. But if you notice multiple, like, yeah, I have that, and I have that, and I have that, and I have that, then it may be time for you to talk to your doctor and start making lifestyle changes. So if your goal, as we're talking about gestational diabetes, is to, okay, I have this and I need to start getting my health together now, right? So we want to, if you want to have a baby, but you've been diagnosed with prediabetes, you've been diagnosed with PCOS, right? You've been diagnosed with diabetes. We want to get you back into a healthy state before you get into a pregnancy, right? Because once you get into a pregnancy, if you start your pregnancy with prediabetes, it's very likely that it will turn into gestational diabetes during your pregnancy, right? If you start your pregnancy unhealthy, then it is very likely that you'll have more health issues during your pregnancy. So, now that we talked about sort of the signs and symptoms, let's move on just a little bit of what we need to do. This is what everybody wants to know, right? What do we need to do in order for us to begin to reverse that insulin resistance? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to lift weights. I know you didn't want to hear that. I know that wasn't the first thing you wanted to hear. You need to move, not just move. You don't need to just get up and go for a walk. You don't need to go take a yoga class. You need to lift something heavy, heavy enough to stimulate muscle, right? So this is the importance of lifting heavy. When you build muscle, muscle acts like a sponge for blood glucose. So taking you back to the beginning of our talk today, right? When we talked about you eat food, the carbohydrates in the food converts into blood glucose inside of your bloodstream. Now your blood glucose has risen, right? Now, there's two ways in which you can get that blood glucose out your blood, right? We want our insulin hormone to kick in, police that blood glucose and push it down, right? The other thing that we can do in order to keep that blood glucose low is to create a sponge inside of our body that will suck the blood glucose out of our blood and give our insulin much less work to do. The only thing that does that is muscle. Your body stores blood glucose. Think of it like it just absorbs the blood glucose out of your muscle. So this is not about, oh, you need to walk for 30 minutes 3 days a week. I'm a straightforward person. All my clients know this. Anybody that has been following me online know this. I'm not going to mince words with you. Walking is not good enough, right? I actually had a DM conversation with somebody today. Yes, that is me in my own DMs, right? Who's like, I want to lose weight, but to be honest, I'm not willing to do anything more than walk. Man, I'm not the coach for you, right? I very rarely prescribe walking as a way to reach your weight loss goal. I'm going to be honest with you. So if you don't want to lift some weights, then I may not be the coach for you, right? So you want to lift weights and lift heavy weights, right? You have to stimulate muscle growth. This is not about, oh, I want to just lift 5 pounds. 5 pounds are paperweights. You don't got to lift 300. You don't got to become a B powerlifting competition like I do, but you got to lift weights heavy enough to stimulate your muscle growth. So that's number one. Number two, y'all know what I'm going to say. I'm sure that people who've been following me, if you've been following me for 30 days or more, you know what I'm going to say. Stop eating so darn much. Stop eating so darn much. Remember, it is when you eat. Stop eating all the time. You don't have to eat 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. That is too often that your blood glucose is rising. If you're practicing for a marathon and you need the nutrient density of 3 meals and 2 snacks, go practice for your marathon. I'm not talking to you. If you are training to run an Ironman, go run your Ironman. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the other 90% of people who do not do that. Actually, I read something the other day that said 0.1% of the world's population, only 0.1% of the world's population has actually run a marathon. So, congratulations that you've ran a marathon, but I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the rest of us, 99% of the people, right, who don't run marathons, all right? So, when you eat, so eat less, right? Intermittent fasting, Sunnah Monday, Thursday fast, all of those things are beneficial. I'm not giving you a particular protocol. Again, this is for educational purposes only. And when you eat, focus on protein. Eat more protein, eat less carbohydrates, right? Reduce the carbohydrates. I cannot emphasize that enough. 90% of people eat too many carbohydrates. All right? Eating too much rice, too much bread, too much pasta, right? Every time you eat those things. So, when it comes to food, and very quickly again, your body converts the carbohydrates into blood glucose. All right? Blood glucose, when it comes in, it rises, it builds up inside of your blood glucose. Insulin comes in to knock it down. Like, you're getting too high, go back down, right? That's the way it works. The more carbohydrates you eat, the higher your blood glucose is going to get. It's like really simple common sense kind of stuff. The more processed it is, the higher the blood glucose is going to be. If you need to reduce your blood glucose, reduce your carbohydrates. All right? Reduce. And I'm not talking about, please don't ask me, well, what do I substitute? Don't substitute. Find alternatives. You do not have to have rice every meal. You want rice every meal. Rice may taste good with every single meal, but when you have spent years of overindulging, it's something that you might have to give up. Just being honest, right? So you have to reduce your carbohydrates so you can prevent those insulin spikes, right? So eat more above ground vegetables. Protein, above ground vegetables. That is where you need to be focused on. Protein and above ground vegetables, right? Above ground vegetables means squash, eggplants, spinach, collard greens, what do you call it? Peppers, right? Tomatoes, above ground vegetables. Why not below ground vegetables as a focus? Those should be minimized at the very least, right? Because they are higher in carbohydrates. And yes, they have fiber. Yes, brown rice has fiber, but it's like the difference in your blood glucose is like maybe 5 points. So instead of your blood glucose rising to 160, it's going to rise to 150. It's really not a huge difference, right? Reduce the amount of carbohydrates that you are consuming, right? So that is something you can do throughout your whole pregnancy. I think as a mom of 4, right? Having had 5 pregnancies, 4 live children from those 5 pregnancies. When you are pregnant, it is almost as if everything goes out of the window, right? I can eat as much as I can. I can eat whatever I want because I am creating life. I'm holding life inside of me, right? Right? It just becomes sort of a cultural thing. Oh, give her more because she's eating for baby. Give her more because she's eating for baby. And that actually have you eating for not just the baby in your stomach, but every baby you're going to have in your lifetime. And you trying to put all those calories in one pregnancy. That is a problem, right? Really, when you're pregnant, you only need about an extra 500 to 800 calories. Right? That's actually not really that much more. We think that it is much more. And one of the reasons why women also tend to eat more is because of that. Say we just go back into these unhealthy eating habits. Not that even people who eat healthy, right? I eat healthy all of the time, but I can have this extra thing because I'm with child, right? So if you are at risk of gestational diabetes, meaning previous pregnancy, you had gestational diabetes. Before you got pregnant, you had pre-diabetes. If you are have or you actually have diabetes when you get pregnant, all of these things apply to you. You really need to reduce the amount of carbohydrates that you're eating, eat less often, and build muscle. That is the three key things to both managing, but more than managing, because I don't believe in just managing pre-diabetes or diabetes or PCOS. I believe in healing your body and reversing it. All right. So now let's go to, we have had the baby. According to research, the children that we've had during gestational diabetes, they actually are at greater risk of developing diabetes themselves. So we have to be aware of that and start our kids with healthy eating habits, right? That means that we need, well, not might, but we need to break the generational curses of bad eating habits, all right? So, yes, diabetes runs in my family, but also no one runs in my family. Think about that for a second. Diabetes runs in my family, but also no one runs in my family. Change and normalize health and wellness in your family for yourself and your children. 1, stop rewarding kids with food. Food is for nutrition. It is not a reward, right? Sitting still doing Juma does not mean you can have 5 donuts. I'm just saying. Get an A on your exam does not mean you can go to the candy store. It is better for you to buy your kid the toy that they wanted, right? Because we're talking about, people say, oh, well, don't buy your kids so many toys. When we're talking about breaking generational health, you're going to get more longevity out of that kid's health when you spoil them with the toy than spoiling them with the food. We have to disconnect food as a reward. We know as adults, food is a reward for us. It's been there since we were kids, right? Our parents may not have known what we know, but now that we know better, we have to do better. We need to intentionally, as we are breaking generational curses, that's the new hashtag, right? We are building generational wealth. That's the new hashtag. How about we start building generational health? When we build generational health, we are being conscious of how we are teaching our children to have a relationship with food. Food should nourish their body, how they feel, what they're able to do. It's not an emotional pacifier. We can't keep taking every generation and giving them the same emotional pacifier of sugar and sweets and rewarding them with food. And then when they become an adult, when they have a celebration, we're eating food. When they're sad, we're eating food. And then they're 30 years old and they're like, I'm 50 pounds overweight, Mom, what do I do? And now we're passing on our weight loss advice to our kids. How about this? How about we set a goal of not having to pass along weight loss advice? How about we set a goal for our kids to live healthily as a lifestyle, healthily as a lifestyle, and live in a way that they don't have to worry about, being obese, right? We have to change the way that we are teaching children about what it means and why we eat. Educate your kids on, I'm not saying that all kids are going to eat vegetable. Let me say that. I'm not saying that all kids are going to eat everything that's healthy, but you as a parent has to figure out how to get them to eat more things that are healthy for their bodies. If that means introducing them to smoothies, introducing them to things that you don't like. What you gonna do for your kids, right? Because this is a really common thing. My kids don't eat vegetables because I don't eat vegetables. I never liked vegetables as a kid. My mom never made me eat vegetables. I don't like vegetables, so I don't cook vegetables. Hmm. If your mom never taught you how to save money, how to manage money, how to budget money, but now you're a full-fledged grown adult and you know how to budget money, manage money, and save money, that is a skill that you had to learn. That is something that you had to practice. That is something that you had to get information about and to put into your lifestyle. You have to treat health and nutrition in the same way. Your health is going to be much more meaningful to your life than your wealth. If you are wealthy, building your dream house, and you have to make sure that it has an elevator because you cannot physically walk upstairs, how much of your house will you enjoy? If you are wealthy and you have the means to travel the world, any place you want to go, but when you get to that place, you have to alter your activities. You have to skip certain sites because it has stairs. You are not able to actually see certain things because it's not handicap accessible. What do you think is going to be more important, your wealth or your health? Your life changes immensely when you have health. That is wealth. That should be just as important as you becoming financially astute, financially stable. Your health is just as important. And when we practice good health habits, we can pass those habits on to our children, particularly the women. Why particularly the women? And I'm going to say this and then I'm going to get off my little soapbox and we're going to talk next week, but particularly the women, because statistically, even in a two-parent household where there is a division of domestic duties, 80% of those households, the women do the shopping and cooking. This is just statistics. So this is not about, well, it's not just me, we are in a modern day America and, my husband sweeps the floor and folds his own clothes, right? Awesome. He's practicing the sunnah. Hooray. But you probably do the cooking and the shopping. So if you're responsible for the nourishment of your family, imagine the impact that you make when you put health as the focus of that nourishment. That's why it is so important for us as women to show up our healthiest, happiest self in every area of our life, because our health depends on it, our children's health depend on it, and our family's health depend on it. I'm going to come down off my soapbox now. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening. Feel free to tag a friend, share this video. Join me every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Facebook, Instagram. You know where to find me if you have questions, comments. I'm in the comments and DMs, so feel free to reach out. All right? You guys have an awesome rest of your day. Assalamu alaikum.